For this story I neither expect nor ask belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, yet mad am I not. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world plainly and without comment a series of household events. From my infancy, I was especially fond of animals and was given by my parents a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time and never was so happy as when feeding and petting them. As I grew into my manhood, I derived from this peculiarity of character one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished and loved a faithful dog, I do not need to explain the nature of my feelings. I married early and was happy to find that my wife's disposition was similar to my own. Observing my liking for domestic pets, she immediately procured those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. The latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and wise to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife made frequent references to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he followed me wherever I went about the house. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more reckless of the feelings of others. My wife and my pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected them, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from mistreating him, although I had no scruple of mistreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through affection they came my way. But my disease grew upon me, and at length even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to feel the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound on my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I took from my pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of his eyes from the socket. When reason returned the next morning, I experienced a sentiment half of horror and half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty, but it was, at best, a feeble feeling. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but as might be expected, fled in terror at my approach. At first, I was grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and so, one morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes, and with the bitterest remorse at my heart, hung it because I knew that it had loved me, and because I felt that it had given me no reason of offense, hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin that would so jeopardize my soul as to place it beyond the reach of any mercy. For months I could not rid myself of the specter of the cat, and during this period there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal and began to look about me for another pet of the same species with which to take its place. One night, as I wandered home, my attention was suddenly drawn to a black object in the road. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and resembling him in every respect. Upon my touching him, he purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted to see me. When I prepared to go home, the animal accompanied me, and upon reaching the house, it domesticated itself at once and immediately became a great favorite with my wife. For my part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated. But its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed me. And by slow degrees, these feelings rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty, preventing me from physically abusing it. But gradually I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing. What added to my hatred of the beast, no doubt, was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. This fact only endeared it to my wife, who, as I have already said, possessed in a high degree that humanity of feeling which once had been my distinguishing trait. With my loathing for this cat, however, its liking for myself seemed to increase. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was withheld from so doing partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I am at a loss how otherwise to define the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me. Neither by day or by night knew I the blessing of rest anymore. During the day, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the night, I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face and its vast weight resting eternally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of such torments, evil thoughts became my sole intimates. The darkest and the most evil of thoughts. My temper increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, and I abandoned myself to the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of fury, to which my wife was the most usual and most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of our house. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and nearly tripped me. This exasperated me to madness. Lifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal, which of course would have proved fatal had it descended. But this blow was stopped by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe into her head. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. It was then that I determined to wall it up in the cellar. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, and then relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. I prepared a plaster which could not be distinguished from the old. With this, I carefully went over the new work. When I had finished, the wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness. for I had firmly resolved to put it to death. However, it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my anger and had fled. It is impossible to describe the blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature made in my heart. It did not make its appearance during the night, and I soundly slept. Yes, slept even with the burden of murder on my soul. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor did not come. Once again, I breathed as a free man. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever. As for my wife, a few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came, very unexpectedly, into the house and proceeded to make a rigorous investigation of the premises. I felt no embarrassment whatever as I accompanied them in their search. At length they descended into the cellar, and my heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. The police were soon satisfied and prepared to depart. I burned to say if but one word of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party prepared to leave, "I'm glad to have allayed your suspicions. By the way, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In my desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered. "I may say an excellently constructed house. These walls are solidly put together." And here, through a frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane, which I held in my hand, upon that very portion of the wall behind which stood the corpse of my wife. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into the silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry at first muffled and broken like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, an inhuman howl, a shriek, half of horror and half of triumph. For one instant, the police remained motionless. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell. The corpse stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red, extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had led me into murder, and whose voice had now consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monstrous black cat up within the tomb.